I-24 News exclusive this hour. Negotiations are reportedly underway between Israel, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia to form a defense security alliance between the four nations. Unnamed officials responding to I-24 News told us they're not confirming the details of this report, but added that Israel is constantly working towards improving its relations with its Arab neighbors. Let's discuss further with our defense correspondent, Daniel Tzemach, joining us live in Tel Aviv this hour. Daniel, thank you for being with us. Before we get into what a pact like this might look like, Daniel, of course, part of the reason why this story is so interesting, two words, Saudi Arabia, the nation Israel has been seeking better relations with, certainly after the Abraham Accords introduced by the Trump administration.
Exactly right, Ayman. And Saudi Arabia is also a country that Israel shares many concerns with, not least of which and foremost is, of course, the Iranian threat. Obviously, Israel has been warming its relations with Gulf states, and Saudi Arabia is one of them, even though, as you mentioned quite accurately, they have not normalized or signed an official treaty, as Israel has, with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, and with other countries as well. But as far as the Gulf is concerned, those are the two really big names. And so when it comes to everything that's happening in the geopolitical sphere, when we see the ongoing stalemate, if you will, between the United States and Iran, it does seem as though not just Israel, but other Gulf states are going to want to try and hedge their bets, if you will, trying to protect their interests, because what is going to happen is still unknown. They don't know whether or not the U.S. will re-engage in the same sort of deal with Iran as we saw in 2015. And so because of that, you are going to see a lot of operations, a lot of activities from many countries in the region that are concerned about Iran's nuclear program and want to make sure that their assets and their interests are protected. So in that sense, this all does fall into place. And to see Israel and Saudi Arabia getting closer also in this sphere would not be surprising, but it would be a significant development. There is no question about that. We're talking about something that could appear to be something like a NATO alliance. Israel has recently been moved from the European command as far as the United States military relationship is concerned to the Central Command, which is really bringing it into the same group as the UAE and other countries in the Gulf. So this does follow with that trend of Israel warming its relations concretely, if you will, with some of these Gulf states. So in that sense, we're talking about mutual interests and mutual concerns, and of course the chief concern is still Iran, and that does seem to be bringing these sides closer together.
On that point, Daniel, you mentioned, of course, the Biden administration and its plans to move forward with a new deal with Tehran. One could imagine, Daniel, that Washington won't be too pleased to see Israel, one of its closest allies, and other nations, including Saudi Arabia, forming another agreement that's also supposed to tackle the Iranian threat.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, ultimately, when it comes to the Biden administration and how it may change dynamics in the Middle East, maybe the two countries that are most impacted by it, as far as the larger, most powerful ones, are, of course, Israel and Saudi Arabia. But Donald Trump has been, you could say, Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's best friend for the past 4 years, but also the same can be said for Saudi Arabia. The United States has been very, not only soft, but encouraging and supportive of Saudi Arabia, not only in word, but also in action. We're talking about military agreements and weapons sales and things of that nature. So that certainly would change the sort of dynamic even more so between the Biden administration and the Saudi Arabian kingdom. And that's something that could have been expected, but we haven't necessarily seen those concrete steps being taken until now.
All right. Excellent insight, Daniel. As we continue to delve into the story, thank you, Daniel Tzemach, for joining me this hour. To repeat for our viewers, the headline this hour is that negotiations are underway, reportedly, between Israel, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain to form a defense security alliance between the nations. Unnamed officials we spoke to said they are not confirming those details, but that